Welcome everyone. We're about to get started. We'll give everyone just a minute to settle in and get online, and then we will begin. All right, I'd like to welcome Crystal Olivero. She is our Chief Development Officer at the LSU Health Foundation. She's going to get us started.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first annual Wonder Women panel at LSU Health. I'm Crystal Olivero. I'm the Chief Development Officer here at the LSU Health Foundation. And we are really excited to be here today with all of these incredible women. All of our panelists, including our moderator, are graduates of LSU Health. They're all from different professional fields and different backgrounds, but all of them have helped to pave the way for the next generation of female healthcare providers. And many of these women are trailblazers. They are and they were, even though they probably didn't know they were trailblazing at the time, but they have all broken their own respective glass ceilings for each of us. And we are really excited to be with them. And we hope that you leave this panel today feeling inspired by hearing from their stories. We will be taking audience questions at the end of the panel around noon. So you will post those questions in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. You can also message anyone directly using the chat function if you need any help or assistance. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jennifer Avegno as our moderator. Many of you will recognize her from her role as the Director of New Orleans Department of Health. Dr. Avegno is also an emergency room physician here at LSU Health Sciences Center and an alum, and we are thrilled to have her moderate this panel for us today. Dr. Avegno, show is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Sam. Thank you to LSU for having us here today. I'm really honored to be asked to be the moderator of what I hope will be a yearly event to discuss the successes and some of the challenges of women in healthcare that many of us have faced. I don't know that I count as a Wonder Woman, but I do, thanks to the crew of muses, now have a shoe that says that. So maybe that's all I needed to be selected as the moderator. I am a New Orleans native. I am LSU Medicine class of 2001 and LSU Charity Hospital Emergency Medicine class of 2005. We remember what happened to Charity in that year. I've practiced emergency medicine ever since as academic faculty, both at Tulane and LSU. For the past 2.5 years, I've been the director of the New Orleans Health Department, which has been interesting to say the least. Even though I'm not sure I consider myself a Wonder Woman, my path to medicine was blazed by some folks that I do consider to be Wonder Woman, one of whom is listening on this call, my Aunt Kristen, who is LSU School of Medicine class of 1981 and has been running the ICU at MD Anderson for the last 30 years or so. And it's really her mother, my grandmother, born in 1924, who was denied her chance to go to medical school because her father thought it wasn't fitting for a lady to be a doctor, that inspired her to give the love of academics, of service, of medicine, and of the transformative power of healing as a profession to both Kristen and myself and her other children and grandchildren. So I think I'm going to dedicate this panel to her honor today. But what I'm excited to do is hear from all of the experiences of our women on the panel. We've got such a wide range of people, of professions, of specialties and experiences. I'd like to start by going around the horn in alphabetical order, giving everybody just a brief minute or two to introduce themselves, give a little bit of background, and then we're going to dive right in. We've got questions that you all submitted to kick off the discussion, and I think that we will be taking additional questions in the chat. So I'm hoping this will be a conversation and not simply a lecture. That being said, let's meet our esteemed panelists. I'd love to start with my friend and colleague, Dr. Augustus Wallace.
Thank you, Dr. Vecchio, and we are good friends. It's good to see you this morning. My name is Dr. Allison Augustus Wallace, and I'm a Baton Rouge, Louisiana native. My undergraduate institution is LSU, where I'm class of 94 and 97 with my undergraduate degree and first master's in natural sciences with both emphasis in biochemistry, respectively. I am class of well, I have a second master's degree in healthcare management from UNO, but as far as LSU Science Center, I earned my PhD here in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology under Dr. Arthur L. Haas, and I am class of 2014 in that respect. In addition to that, in this role, I serve as an associate professor, research, and undergraduate director of pipeline programs in the School of Medicine's Office of Diversity and Community Engagement. Several hats I wear. I won't get into them right now because of time, but I will say because of that, I've been blessed to be able to earn an additional certification in diversity, equity, and inclusion from Cornell University recently. In addition to that, I am a happily married woman. My husband, Victor Wallace III, will celebrate 22 years this year in October. I am a bonus mom of 3, bonus mother-in-law of 3, bonus grandmother of 3, an aunt of 2 nephews and a beautiful niece. And I am very happy to be with you all here this morning and celebrate the fellow panelists here. I feel very humbled in this role, especially looking at the bios of everyone else this morning. I too, I'm not quite sure I'm a Wonder Woman, but I am honored to be here, so thank you.
Thank you. Great to have you here. Let's go to Dr. Dabney Smith.
Let me unmute myself.
Dr. Dabney Smith, you're still muted.
Okay, can you hear me now? Oh, let's see.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Kela Dabney Smith. I am a native of Franklin, Louisiana, which is between New Iberia and Morgan City for people who don't know. I'm a graduate of the University of New Orleans with a BS in biology, and I am a graduate of LSU Medical School from the class of 2000. I completed my residency at Emory University. Most of my career has been spent as an internist in various roles, from traditional internal medicine to hospitalist medicine. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I transitioned into the business of medicine, and I am the director of medical operations for a division of an insurance company. I am the mother of 3 children and the wife of my husband, Ron, who's a dentist for the last 20 some odd years. And I'm thrilled to be with you guys. Very impressive group. So I'll keep mine short and sweet.
Dr. Fontham?
Hi, how are you? Very nice to see you all, in addition to hearing from you all. And I look forward to the day when we can do this in person. I'm sure, Jennifer, you're ready for that time too. But it's really a pleasure to be here, and I am honored to be a part of you, and I don't think I belong, but thank you for inviting me nevertheless. I have been on the faculty at LSU as a professor since 1980. So I'm not a spring chicken, as you can tell. I have majored in epidemiology for my master's, and I got my doctoral degree also in epidemiology. And I primarily do cancer research, cancer epidemiology. And it's been a joy. I love doing it. I have also been an administrator here at LSU. I was a program chairman and the founding dean of the LSU School of Public Health, which took a little of my time, as you can imagine, away from research, but I enjoyed doing both. And I look forward to hearing more from all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Fontham. And I have to thank you for being crazy or brave enough to give me my first job in medicine before I went to medical school. So if not for you, I probably wouldn't be moderating this panel.
That was not crazy, I might add.
Let's move to Dr. Gates.
Good morning, folks. I too am honored to be included in this illustrious group. I came to New Orleans to go to Charity Hospital School of Nursing, an occupation that really helped me get through medical school and enjoy every minute of it. Then did my residency at LSU in pediatrics, pulmonary fellowship, and then I moved on to Children's Hospital when it was just converting from a crippled children's hospital to the children's hospital it is today. I was the assistant medical director, associate medical director, interim medical director, associate medical director, interim medical director. That ought to tell you something about that career. I'm not sure whether to say this or not, but I graduated from med school in 1970. So I have a lot of different experience perhaps than some of the others here. I have to thank Dr. Fowler, who was head of the Department of Pediatrics at the time, because he agreed to have the LSU residents come and be involved at Children's Hospital, and that made a huge difference. We went from an ER that was a closet to usual ER, Dr. Avegna, and an ICU that was rotating from room to room as necessary, to a 16 bed to whatever size it is today. My spouse and I have been together 45 years, married for 10, 12, something like that. I retired. My occupation allowed me a lot of other opportunities in the outside world, which we can discuss later. And I retired some years ago, thank goodness. And anytime you got that in mind, just talk to me.
Thank you, Dr. Gates. Dr. Kennard.
Yeah, well, it seems like I'm not the only one that is surprised that I'm on this panel today. I came through all of this in a very circuitous manner, and I was born into a family of 5 girls. I'm the 5th, born in Baptist Hospital in New Orleans, and my dad was a chemical engineer. My mother was a teacher and homemaker, and my dad moved us 4 times during my schooling before we returned to Baton Rouge in the middle of my sophomore year of high school. And then high school to the biochemists in the room that, you know, there were great teachers and things that found that if you had an interest in biological sciences, they always encouraged you. And I have to tell you, I was never discouraged about following, you know, into a medical field. But I went to LSU undergrad, and at the, you know, end of that time in applying for medical school and not getting in, I was able to work at OK Long Hospital and meet the surgeons, the surgical residents, which led to a surgical technician job where I got to work at Our Lady of the Lake with just phenomenal surgeons in different specialties. So I always knew that that was the incurable love of my life, was surgery. And on their suggestion, when for a second time I was on the alternate list at LSU Medical, I started, interviewed and started school in Mexico, and the University Autónoma, where, you know, you had to apply and be accepted. There were not a lot of Americans in the school. And so when I was then bilingual after 3 years there, LSU accepted me into the great class of 1985. And that was the class I should have been in all along. And in my rotations through LSU, I was fortunate enough to have a chief resident named Joe Macaluso that people on the board know. And even though I knew that I really wanted to do surgery, and that I was able to see from all the surgeons that I'd worked with that the 2 happiest specialists were the orthopedists and the urologists, I didn't think that there was going to be a way to do either. And Joe Macaluso was telling me not only was there a way to do it, but that there was such a need for women in urology in the United States, and that it would be in the situation when maybe the field would be too crowded for a man, it was wide open for women. And he was right. And the hard part was just getting in. And each time I went for an interview, it would be like, oh, here's the parade article that shows there's only 9 board certified women. And actually there was 8. One of the people in there is a guy in Tampa. His name was Novell. But anyway, I was lucky enough to have the University of South Florida want to take a chance during a time where it was very crowded, very difficult to get in. And the games began from there. So I am a board certified urologist, and worked in private practice, and then did a lot of other ventures, which we can talk about. And presently I'm retired.
Thank you, Dr. Kennard. Great to have you. And last but not least, Dr. Swallow.
Hi, thank you for your patience. I'm having trouble with my iPad, so I'm on the phone. But thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I was born in Clinton, Louisiana, brought home to Clinton, Louisiana. Graduated from Southeastern Louisiana University in Hammond. Then taught school for 2 years and got a T certificate while waiting to get into dental school. And so I taught school and then went to LSU, graduated in 1985, and went on to do an advanced education in general dentistry course. Graduated from that in 86, and then did periodontics and graduated from that in 88. Opened a practice with an orthodontist, shared space with an orthodontist for first 2 years out in private practice as a periodontist, and then opened on my own, in my own space, 1990. And 5 years ago, I found it necessary to move. So at 57 years old, I had to actually start over and build a new practice because my previous renter did not want to continue my lease. They had other plans for the hospital. So that's how I came to be where I am near Truro, between Truro and the river. I am very involved, and I love being involved in organized dentistry, and serve on some national committees as well as a lot of local committees. Volunteerism is fun, in my opinion, and I have really enjoyed it. I have 3 sons, by the way. I met my husband in dental school, and he's an orthodontist. His name is different from mine, though. And we're proud of our sons and have a good time being a mom and being a dentist and being a volunteer. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Swallow. I was taking some notes as everyone was giving just their highlights of their career. I'm sure there's many more things that we've missed. And just in this group of our 6 panelists, we have basic science, public health, primary care, hospital critical care, specialty, academic, private practice, research, business, administrative, medical directors, diversity and inclusion work, dental, rural, and urban. I think that speaks volumes about what women in healthcare do. We very rarely have one hat. We generally have multiple professional hats that we balance, as many of you have said, with family, service, community. Dr. Gates, I'm excited to hear about your other activities. Maybe you can give us some pointers. And so the possibilities are really endless for women. And I think in a richer way, maybe than some of our traditional male colleagues who go to work and come home and that's it. So just wanting that to frame the discussion, there is so much experience here in anything that any potential student, resident, or someone interested in the field could be wondering, can I do this if I want to do X? The answer is, I think, unequivocally yes. So let's dive into the questions. The way I've formatted this, and I hope it's okay with our panelists, is that I'm going to ask a question and I'll have a sort of a designated person to go to first. That doesn't mean you're the only person. That doesn't mean that I think that you have the most wonderful answer for it. It's just that I want to hear what you've got to say. And then if any of the other panelists wanted to chime in and give their perspective afterwards, I think that'll just make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. So we'll sort of start at the beginning, and I'm going to start with Dr. Fontham. So looking back, can you share with us an early memory of what led you to go into healthcare in general?
I'd be happy to do that. I decided at age 7, as a matter of fact, which was very naive on my part. I was diagnosed with polio at 7 years of age, and that was the year before the vaccines, either vaccine came out against polio. So I had to leave Crowley, which is my little town I grew up in, to go to the Baton Rouge General because they had a polio ward, and I was there. Unfortunately, my mother couldn't come along because her father was dying of stomach cancer, and she was a caregiver for him. So I can't say that it wasn't slightly traumatic the whole time, but I knew I had a disease, didn't know why I had the disease, and I knew my grandfather had another disease, and I didn't understand that. I was in a ward where we needed to have heat therapy, but it wasn't commonly available, and so they boiled the wool blankets and wrapped us up in them. And we had to chew salt tablets because we lost so much salt because of those hot blankets that were around us. It was a very interesting time, and I really wanted to know how people got the disease, what could be done about it, why is it different from person to person, and that was a perfect opportunity to do research. So instead of going into clinical practice, which I know I would have enjoyed, and started out that way, decided that research was for me because that way I could learn the whys and wherefores of disease. And that led me to epidemiology, and it's been absolutely wonderful. I love it. I've taught it, I work it, I live it. And I have never had a moment's doubt as to the benefit of my having gone in that direction. And I love to mentor our master's and doctoral students at the School of Public Health. I too am retired, and I've been emeritus since 2013. So I've been doing this for quite a while, but I have never lost my enthusiasm for the disease.
Dr. Fontham, that sounds like a movie. If I were to write the movie of someone who would go on to found a public health school, I think that would be the story. I think, you know, as an emergency medicine faculty, I reviewed residency applications for many, many years. And what you're describing, the experience of suffering or interacting with the healthcare system as a child that then became the transformative path to your career is a theme that came up a lot, particularly in the female experience. For a lot of the women that I would read, it was their exposure to what medicine means. Do any of our other panelists have a similar story about maybe an interaction with the healthcare system, either personally or with a family member that put them on the path?
Actually, yes, I do. So for myself, it's similar in a sense. My first experience that I recall, I was 6. My sister, born next to me, was 4. And I remember that it was just our typical appointment with Dr. Haney, our pediatrician at the time. And I remember my sister starting to cry and my need to protect her. And in that moment, he understood, as me being her older sister, that need. And so he comforted me and helped me comfort her as he was examining her. And that was the moment, the earliest moment that it was born. our parents are different professions. My mother, our mother's an educator, although deceased in 2019, and our father is a political scientist, retired from the United States Air Force. And so, being that they saw us starting to take that interest at 6 and 4, they nourished it and pushed it. And so in every aspect, as we went through elementary school, middle school, high school, into LSU, both of us, we had the opportunity to actually enrich ourselves and experience that. So again, we had the shadowing experience. Our parents, before it was called shadowing, our parents were pushing us into these areas with our physicians that we were seeing on a regular basis in this space. And as myself were, as my sister and I attended LSU, I actually ventured out. I found myself needing a little bit more in respect to answering questions. And so while she remained in that path, and she today is a physician scientist, I decided to go the route of being the scientist independently. I had a professor, Dr. Andy Dorich. I asked a question as an undergraduate in biochemistry, and he told me the way I asked the question that my tagline, as I had identified at that time as a biochemistry major with pre-med emphasis, didn't match in his opinion. And so he placed me in his lab, and that was the journey for me moving forward in that space. And so I found myself just being really embracing biochemistry and the research aspect, the independence, but at the same time, the team aspect of it, that I could actually have and involve myself in both, and at the same time answer questions and to use the scientific method in such a way as to learn things. And so again, I do agree, the earliest exposure, having had that exposure at 6 years old and finding myself, and I'm not ashamed of my age, I'm 50 now, I find that as a very important catalyst to where I am today.
Dr. Augustus Wallace, that's a brilliant segue into my next question, which I'm going to ask Dr. Dabney Smith to take the first stab. Who was it that helped you along the way? I think what we're hearing from all of you is that there was someone, a role model, whether it was personal or professional, who either lit that spark or really helped put you on the path in a meaningful way. So was there a person like that for you? And who was it that you can, or maybe it's more than one person that you can attribute your success to?
Well, I think my experience is probably a little bit different. Even from Dr. Augustus, I really wasn't encouraged to go into medicine. I didn't know anyone that was a doctor. I didn't even know anyone who was a nurse. And so I originally was a biological science major at UNO, and my whole goal was to work in the lab at the FBI. That's what I was going to do, which, you can laugh at now. And I don't know, I think I told it to somebody, and I had pretty severe asthma at the time that wasn't well taken care of. And a guy told me, "You can't work for the FBI, you have asthma." And so I figured I'd just finish my biological science degree because I really liked biological science. And then eventually I switched to physical therapy, and I was volunteering at Baptist Hospital in the physical therapy department there. And I worked with a guy whose name was Kevin, and I think his dad was a doctor. And he was like, "You really should go to medical school." And I was like, "That's easy for you to say. You have money and you can go to medical school," but that wasn't the case for me. And I remember, going to my I guess, what do you call that? The counselor for, pre-med counselor at UNO, and he slammed the door in my face twice. And so I was like, well, this is interesting. I don't know if this is going to happen for me. And I remember telling my grandmother that I was interested in becoming a physician, but I didn't know what to do because, the counselor slammed the door in my face twice. And so, I grew up under very modest circumstances, and she had a doctor. His name was Dr. Gary Wiltz, and he asked what I was up to and what I was doing. And she told him the story. And he called me and he said, "Hey, are you really interested?" And I said, "Yes." And he said that, well, there's this program at Tulane, was called for med reppers, basically. And so I did that program. And then slowly but surely that process came into place. And that's how I became a doctor. I just, kind of plugged my way through, and I can't say I had many role models, but usually if I start something, I try to finish it and I figure out a way around it. I had lots of friends that kind of helped walk me through it, and that's how I did it. So I don't have the same sparkle story as everyone else, but I think we all get to the same place at different points. So it was a little bit of a roundabout journey, but I got there the same as everyone else. So
Well, I want to stay there for a second and maybe ask some of our other panelists to, what you're describing is very, very interesting. And it's some really chance encounters, right? The coworker whose dad was a doctor who gave you the spark, your grandmother having the discussion with her physician, right? It was not an education system, a counseling system that was set up to nurture the potential of everyone, whether they were a woman or a man.
No.
And I wonder, for those of us, or those of you on the panel, that for every chance encounter that you had, there are probably 50 chance encounters that someone who would have been just as good of a physician or a healthcare professional did not have, that did not allow them to get to the next level. So what do you all think about, is that still the case? Is that a successful way to get people into medicine, or what do we need to do as a system to better encourage those who have a spark?
I'd like to answer whichever.
No, go ahead.
Okay, because of the fact that what they're saying with the mentors and everything, that's, I think for all of us, that's kind of the better way to go, right? I mean, go ahead. If you want to answer instead, or do you want me to continue? This Zoom thing.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Kennard. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I think that what I was fortunate that there were people that were all along the way encouraging, and I don't know that anybody just came out saying, I'm going to be the first in this and I'm going to do this. It took a lot of people encouraging you and realizing where your talents would lie. And then when then you get into a situation like for me with urology, and you go to a program where it's rah, everything's great, they're happy to see you. And then if your program changes, for instance, the 10 of us started as interns at the University of South Florida, half quit by the end of the first year. They gave us one to go into the second very difficult trauma year. No work hours, no nothing. And so people have a lot of time to see what kind of grit you have and determination and things like that. And I think that then when you're continuing to pursue, if people find out that you have the drive and the talent and stuff, then they continue to nurture it on you and push you forward. So that was after, the med school. So I'm not sure if that's answering your question or not.
But unfortunately, everyone's not going to, those of us that have had opportunity and have had the blessing of that, that's great. But that still doesn't even negate the fact that even myself, I've experienced real life historic structural racism and sexism. And as a woman who's in this intersectional space, I have to acknowledge that. I acknowledge it because it's part of what drives me in this space to do what I do, to open doors and access for others. So while I had these blessings, that is not the typical path. And so knowing that that is a blessing for me, we have to acknowledge that this is not going to just happen for everyone. So the pipeline programs, they have to be there because we have to actively, intentionally attempt to overcome and mitigate the historic, systemic racism and sexism and other isms that exist. In a sense, the system is unfortunately working correctly the way it was set. And so we have to have these programs in place to hopefully mitigate this process until we can find a way to really just turn the turbine in a sense and go in a different direction to make it better for everyone, so that doors are open for everyone and so that everyone can come to the table with equity and access and self-efficacy and feeling good about themselves as they travel these paths and making their decisions along this way and having self-determination. Okay, but I will say, even myself, having somewhat of a charm, that I still had some very interesting challenges, and I'll share those later as we move along. But I just want to make sure that we know that even though those of us who have had opportunity, we can't forget those who have not, and we have to make sure that we're opening doors for those who have not, unfortunately.
I think my experience was a little different because in high school, my counselor told me to go to med school. Now, remember when that was a long time ago, and I thought, I'm going to be a nurse. And then when I was a nurse, I realized I think I can do a better job than some of those doctors. And along med school, there were issues, obviously, but I think it was after I got out of my training that the real problems started, as have been mentioned, and people who really, you were fine, doing the day-to-day work, but don't try to do anything higher or better because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, Dr. Gates, again, brilliant segue. My next question was going to be to you, and it was going to be about barriers. And so maybe there's one that's been a persistent, significant barrier in your career, or maybe it's been a series of barriers thrown in your path. But tell us a little bit about those and what you've learned from them, how you've overcome them, how you've gone around them, and the roadblocks that remained even to the end.
The biggest was you're okay at a lower level, just don't try to go higher. So if you applied for a bigger position, a higher position, a more influential position, it wasn't going to happen. So you did have to find a way around it by finding the other influential people who could get the job done that you wanted done. And maybe it wasn't going to be you, but the job would get done. I think that persisted to the end. And at the end, the problem became that people weren't interested in making advances in whatever services I was wanting to have advanced. And I figured out, I better let somebody else do this because they're not listening. For whatever reason that was, all the isms play in here with age and sex and LGBT issues, and it just didn't happen. But I do have to say, I think I ended up at the right place. For me, I ended up at the right place. And maybe if I'd gotten some of those opportunities, I wouldn't have been as happy as I was at the end. So who knows?
Anybody else want to talk about either the biggest barrier that they still face if you're still practicing or that you experienced throughout?
Jennifer, I would mention one rather large obstacle that was thrown in my path. It was not an ongoing thing, but it certainly took me by surprise. I was the principal investigator of a big multi-center study of looking at the impact of secondhand smoke. And we enrolled women in 5 different cities: Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Atlanta, and New Orleans. And to be in our study, you had to be a lifetime never smoker. And what we wanted to know was, could you get lung cancer? Were you likely to get lung cancer if you'd never smoked, but you lived in the home with a smoker, or you frequented places that were restaurants and bars and what have you, that were often filled with smoke. And it was a wonderful study. It was very interesting. We had the papers that came out of that work encouraged the International Agency for Research on Cancer to declare secondhand smoke as a known human carcinogen. So it was certainly useful to do it. However, the tobacco industry was also aware that our research was going on, and they are very well funded and very aggressive. And as a result, they ran full-page ads in large metropolitan newspapers, Fontham Study, Fatally Flawed, and sent lawyers to come talk to not just me, certainly. I had colleagues and others. But instead of using the correct name of the study, they called it the Fontham Study. I think if they had a woman researcher, maybe it wouldn't look so hot. And I don't know if that was a part of it or not. But we had some very important papers that were published in credible scientific journals. And so eventually it went away with the IARC ruling that sure enough, it's a carcinogen. And I've moved on, I'm happy to say.
Well, Dr. Fontham, I can echo, I've known that story for a long time, and it's really stuck with me, your bravery. And I can say for myself personally, in the past year with the pandemic, I have had to be very decisive, very public, very scientific to the best of our ability, which we all know is never 100% certain or absolute, particularly with an evolving virus. And not been surprised at the amount of blowback and resistance from sort of the groups that you expect, but has very surprised by the attempts to discredit things, primarily by men, I'll say, who are also, educated healthcare professionals, at a time when we're all, as you were, just trying to advance health and save lives. And I wonder, it's nothing if it doesn't make you tougher. And certainly you're as tough as they come, and I've gotten a lot tougher over the year. But I do wonder if the same sort of resistance, both publicly and privately, would have been if I wasn't a sort of youngish middle-aged woman, but a man with white hair and looking the part. I love Dr. Fauci, and everybody respects Dr. Fauci. I don't look like Dr. Fauci. I don't talk like Dr. Fauci. So, it was something that I was not expecting from some of our own. And so to hear you say that is very similar. Anyone else want to talk about a significant barrier? Because I think these are really important for us all to hear, if only to feel that we're not alone, perhaps.
Well, as a classically trained biochemist, I did not come in the package that anyone expected. And that's just the truth. Okay. And I've been told that along the path. I've just simply been told that you're not exactly what we would even embraced or envisioned as a biochemist. That has made me, in a sense, to therefore push forward and to be stronger, because here it is, who are you to decide that for me? This is my calling. And so in this path, this is the path that I decided to follow, and this is the path that I'm going to follow, and that I have followed. And so within that, the resilience, the grit, the persistence, I have 5 P's that I live by. I pray, I plan, I pray again, I proceed, and I persist, looking, moving forward in that space, because again, individuals are going to make those decisions, or at least try to make those decisions. And you have to find those individuals who will be your allies, your advocates, and your accomplices, in a sense, where they help move you through. Some of the things, the implicit bias that I've encountered has been, as a Black woman, has been and continues in spaces to be awfully, incredibly an example of ignorance, okay? And making sure that other individuals that look like me and don't look like me moving in this space, moving forward, has been part of what drives me to play the roles that I play in the opportunities and responsibilities that I have with the Health Sciences Center to overcome the racism, the sexism, the times in which the mansplaining, for instance, in different meetings. I mean, that is an experience when you have said something and it's been your idea, and then in that same conversation, individuals will attempt to walk away with your idea. So it's very important that you're documenting your work. You have to document everything you do, even as minor as you might think it is. You must document it, date, time, etc. Who was in the meeting even, so that you have an opportunity, and make sure that it shows up on your CV or your resume as well, so that when it's time for these movements or these opportunities with allies and accomplices, you can actually have a list of items, your CV, to show your work. Otherwise, it will just be a mist. Okay, so it's very important to document in this space and to be persistent and remain focused. Keep your head up and speak. Do not hide. Very important that you are speaking and that you are continuing to speak and be consistent in this space of speaking your truth.
And Dr. Augustus Wallace, what you said about grit, I think is very important. I think people in general, as we travel through life, starting from the time we're born, life is full of hard knocks. And I think looking back, a lot of us probably realize all that we've learned from the hard knocks. So some of them are blessings, in my opinion. Absolutely. And I think the persistence, and it looks like when I'm looking at some of the questions that some of the audience sent beforehand, it sounds like you're wanting to know, how can I emulate or take some of your successes and your failures and learn from them and be a better person? And so I think if I have anything to say about the challenges that we all face every day, almost every minute, it's to persist, as you said, and I pray as well. I think too, though, I always worked very hard and I got very organized in my life early on. And because I think I work harder maybe than, I work harder maybe than I really need to, perhaps, because I always wanted to look back and say, if I failed, it wasn't for a lack of effort. If somebody doesn't want me on their team because of who I am, then I'll find somebody else to go volunteer for. And believe me, there's lots of opportunities. A lot of people want your time, especially if it's free. And I think all of the volunteerism makes us better people too. So I think the persistence, the grit, getting up, I get up at 4:15 in the morning. I work on my cell phone. I comprise letters, do emails on my cell phone while I'm on the elliptical. And then from there, I go to mass, and then I get to work for about 7:15. So it's, if you want to, and I'm very fulfilled in my life with what I do. So if you want to succeed, my opinion is, work hard and have a good attitude.
Yeah.
Dr. Swallow, you answered my question I was going to ask you, which was, how do you get to be a leader? And it sounds like be early when everyone else is on time, be organized, and work harder than everybody else. And I don't think I could agree more than that. And Dr. Kennard, I know you're, if you want to respond to that, that's great. You were going to be the next question, kind of related to this, sort of giving advice. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self about what you needed to do to succeed? Would you have done anything differently? Or, are you happy with all the way it worked out? Or what would you tell young students, young residents, about what you know now and you wish you learned then?
Well, when you had asked us to do bios, I thought we were supposed to keep it very tight and short. And so essentially, I think part of the reason that Crystal asked me to be on this panel was what I did after I finished urology. To go back to what you want to say, I want to also say that I've spoken with other women that were president of the Society of Women in Urology before me, and we were all saying organizational skills and time management. And I was thinking about this also, make sure you do take that typing course that your dad says to take in high school, because it comes in really handy. Don't pass that one up. But what I wanted to say is that we were able to formulate, because of the fact that there were so few women by sheer numbers, the ways to help. Dr. Allison, you were saying how to help out people and how to say. So I didn't get to discover that there was a group of women in urology that had started the Society of Women Urology until 2 weeks before I finished my residency. I was also very fortunate to have two incredible professors, Dr. Lester Persky and Dr. Perry Hudson, who were giants, professors emeritus, that explained to me that sometimes it's better if you want to affect change, if you want to make it better, like Allison was saying, for your colleagues, maybe outside of the academic sphere. And then when I was able to finally get to this breakfast meeting and meet the woman who founded the organization, Jean Fourcroy, it was the year that they had the flip charts of how to incorporate and how to become an accepted society in the American Urologic. And so then you see that there are other people that want to build upon that way of including people, furthering the careers of women urologists, furthering everything for our patients. And so you need to, I think, identify areas like that where you can help. And Jean Fourcroy was very great in trying to figure out where could each of us find a place for that. And I don't think that, any of us started out, like I said, I'm going to be the leader in this, I'm going to be the It turns out that there's different things that you can do to be a leader, not just by example, but changing it, because that gender bias and the frank sexual harassment that's going on was very detrimental to all of us. And it was important to change that. And it took years. It took working through the Women Physician Congress, all of these different things to pull that out. And I think that we just need to keep doing that, keep advancing our field. Once then people see that we're there, we're competent, then they want to emulate, they want to do the same thing.
Hi, Jennifer. I would just interject just a little bit. I wouldn't particularly say that I'm a leader in any way. But I just wanted to say, because somebody might be listening to this somewhere that needed a little encouragement. And I find that sometimes, some people, the louder you are, the more noise you make. I tend to be more quiet and on the periphery of things, but it doesn't make you any less than anyone else. Sometimes you have to forge your own way. You have to find your own allies. And a lot of times I found that even with med school or undergrad or residency, you're basically invisible. As long as you don't make a lot of trouble or cause any issues, you're just invisible. You're just there. No one really gives you opportunities. You have to kind of figure out your own way forward. And for people listening, and they might not necessarily have someone to help them, I would always say that God sends people to help you. I call them little angels all along the way to help you achieve your goals and to make sure that you're not afraid to jump. I'm not the smartest person in the world. I don't have all these fancy degrees or anything like that, but I've always been willing to jump, to try something new, to go out on the edge, to learn something new. And with that, I think it's very important to remember that, with hard work, perseverance, you can get to just about anywhere you want to go, because there's really no one that can stop you once you make up your mind to do something. You might not necessarily receive a warm welcome everywhere you go, but it doesn't mean that you don't belong there. And so that's
I really want to highlight some of the things you said. Particularly, you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. I know this is something that I struggle with. I am Italian, I am New Orleanian, and I am outspoken. So in my head, if I want to get something across, I do need to be the loudest voice in the room, but really that works sometimes and only for some people. And how do we lift up those voices that are thinking, pondering, have wonderful things to say, but are not going to be the ones maybe don't want to be the ones shouting it for the rooftop? How are we identifying those people? I think you're right. It's amplifying those voices, because in many cases that is what gets the job done. Quietly, diligently, every morning at 4 o'clock, getting it done, rather than protesting or just coming out with a grand statement and then, going on to something else. And so how do we recognize that in the folks that we see every day, whether it's in a classroom setting, whether it's on the wards, whether it's somebody in our office, recognizing that is a form of leadership just as valuable as those at the front of the charge.
Could I second what our past two speakers, including Dr. Avegno, have highlighted? There are opportunities everywhere, but sometimes you have to look for them. Often we don't, because we think, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. But if you do take a chance and say yes, often it's related to your field. I've worked a lot in nonprofits. I got started with the American Cancer Society. Of course, I'm a cancer researcher, so it made good sense. And I was happy when I was asked to go give a talk, and because my boss didn't want to go give the talk. But as a result of that, I had a lifelong experience. I'm still working for the American Cancer Society and ended up the first female president of the American Cancer Society National. And it was a great opportunity. I learned a lot, and I'm still doing work for them. I write cancer screening guidelines with them. And the opportunities are there. Don't be afraid and don't think you can't do them, because chances are, if they appeal to you, it's because you know something about the field, and you will be able to do it.
Yes, and why not you, right?
Right.
And on that topic, and I'll just remind everybody, we'd love to have questions. Please put them in the chat. I have some audience questions that were pre-submitted that we've been drawing from, but one of them, which is leading from all this, is how do we create more opportunity for leadership roles in the health professions for women? If you look at medical school, right? Nationwide, the percentage of women generally exceeds that of men in medical school. And that's, a relatively recent last 10, 20 years development. Those of you that went to medical school in the 70s and 80s know it was quite different. However, with that, there has not been a commensurate change in leadership roles, certainly in the medical schools. And I warned our leaders I was going to do this, but I need to call out LSU. This is an institution that is facing a tremendous amount of scrutiny for its practices in dealing with women. And we can say, well, the medical school isn't part of that. But if we look at the leadership roles of women and individuals of color at LSU, whether it's a department chair, whether it's in the administrative leadership, it nowhere near matches the composition of the classes that are coming through. Those of you in private practice or in other hospitals, I imagine you have a very similar story. So what can we do? Where's the bottleneck? And whether loud or quiet, I'd love to hear all of you weigh in on how you think we get to a place where we look like what our profession really is.
I have to add to that or answer that question, because it sort of flows from what's already been said. You really have to step up. You see an opportunity on a committee, volunteer for it. No, don't necessarily wait to be asked. There's some good numbers on how many women need to be at the table before they take over the flow of the group. And you have to work to have that happen. You have to be willing to take the appointment, or even if you maybe wish you had that hour back some other time. So you have to be willing to step up and not only volunteer, but also accept opportunities that are offered to you that you might not necessarily prefer to do.
I have to agree with Dr. Gates. You have to speak up and you have to step up. There are oftentimes that responsibilities are provided, and if you don't take it, if you don't step forward and you're that person that says, I can do this, then you don't have the opportunity to open doors for others. So someone has to be first. And you often, and even my own path, I've found I had to be first. And whether I wanted to be or not, okay, I had the responsibility to be, because I needed to know that, first of all, I knew I belonged. That was first and foremost. I knew that I had the skill set, and I knew that therefore I belonged in that space. And so then that, moving forward in with that belief, and then saying, okay, I know others, I'm not the only one. There are others like myself. And so taking on the responsibility and saying, I can do this, doing it well, doing it intentionally, whatever the task has been, putting the time and effort to learn as you do, because leadership, good leadership, requires that you are still learning as you're leading, and then you're bringing that information forward to those individuals that you're leading. So in addition to that, being a servant leader, being someone that you are servicing the individuals as you are leading, as you are learning, so that you're part of the task, and then bringing those individuals along with you and preparing the next generation so that they can take your place. It's very important that when the door opens for you, that you are now in a station to use that and open the door for the next.
I also want to make a comment that what people maybe don't understand is just how much fun it is doing it. I love these other women that I worked with on these boards. We're close, we talk all the time. But also when sometimes you're confronted with these things, the response back from the men is so ridiculous that you have to just go and sit and go, they asked you what? And I think it's really crazy. And Jennifer, what you were addressing is how do we keep, fix these kind of situations? And I have to tell you, I want to give kudos to the American Urologic, because they have increased the number of programs. I just got the data yesterday, and maybe full professors and all that, but the chairs, we now have 28 women chairs out of 143 programs. And the other thing is that when we were, my peer group, we're in urology, I was one of the first 75 board certified. It took us from 1962 for the first board certified to 1996 to breach 100 board certified women. And there's 10,000 urologists in the nation. We're now at 10%. And you were saying, how do you get parity? How many people have to be at the table? Well, I think we sort of feel as if you get to stay at the table and eat dinner, that's good enough. I don't know how long it would be for us to go from 10% of the 10,000, but this match that just came out in February, we matched 120 women to 357 spots. That's amazing. We matched as many people this year as it took us till 96 or 97. So I think that if you understand it, if you want to be a part of it and be it, just know it is just so rewarding. It's so great. And I think, I have to tell you, I think we're doing a decent job.
That's phenomenal numbers.
Really something to celebrate. It really is. It really is.
And I think we owe it to pay it forward to the next generation as well, because looking back, the only reason I got started in organized industry, and now I spend probably 20 hours a week on volunteering, but I was asked by Dr. Don Toso and Dr. Darlene Bassett if I would step in to an editorship position for the New Orleans Dental Association newsletter. So something really insignificant in the big scheme of things. But then you start with that, then you get on a board and you go to the board meetings, and eventually you're asked to, would you like to step in as secretary and move your way up to president? And after you're president of that, then you become state president and so on. So it just continues to blossom. So the point I'm making here, though, is that I was asked by somebody, pointed out, and somebody asked me if I would like to have a certain job to do. And if I hadn't been asked, I'm not sure if I'd have had for one thing, I wouldn't even have known that there was such a job to be filled. And also, I don't know if they had this audacity to ask if I was worthy of doing that when I just graduated a year ago. So I think we need to mentor. I do think that that's something we need to do. Go out and find people that you think are what might make a good leader, or they have time on their hands. And there's so many people out there that are going to be wonderful leaders, but they haven't been found yet. And we just started when I was president of Louisiana Dental Association, we started a mentorship program for our dental students. The dental students wanted a dentist that they could look up to answer questions one-on-one. And so that's kind of in the making right now. I think it's going to finally succeed. We've tried 2 or 3 times and it kind of floundered, but I think we're going to get this going. So we need to support the next generation coming in and identify leaders there too. And I think that keeps the whole profession going forward.
And there's a question in the chat from Dr. Price, my aunt, about, and building on what you've said, we all think of mentorship as the younger, the student, the resident, just starting out in the career. And, I personally, I really wish I had more of that. I started my career 6 weeks before Katrina, so that could have had something to do with it. But now that I'm mid-career, and this is her point, that's just as important, if not more important, because I think we've all said, in many cases, you sort of hit that wall. And if you don't know that there's an opportunity like a newsletter that leads you to higher office, or, like Dr. Gates, I was interested to hear you saying I was the interim director, then I was the associate director, then I was the assistant director, but I never heard you say you were the director. So what can we do, not just to mentor those who are starting out, but those of us who are in the middle, and so maybe everybody thinks, oh, they're doing great, they're good, they're a good doctor, they're this position, but not thinking, wait, they've got the potential for more. They've got the potential to be the full director, the CEO, the chief medical officer, whatever it is. Maybe Dr. Gates, if you don't mind starting with that, just sort of mid-career mentoring.
Yeah, well, first I'll give you a word about the interim and all that. Each time the interim happened, they hired a man from away for the job. The interim positions lasted 4 years and 2 years. So it wasn't like 6 weeks or 6 months. So what do we do I gather what you're asking me is, what do we do to overcome that so that you see the opportunities and we see how to put people in those opportunities? And I think we just have to do what we've already said. We have to gain a profile. We have to be seen leading. And maybe you're not leading the hospital yet or the health department yet, but you're leading some aspect of it where your style and your personality can be seen. And sometimes that takes extra work. I also got an MBA, and the biggest thing I learned in that MBA was not all the numbers, but organizational behavior and how to manage people. So whatever you need to do to give yourself some extra talent at managing people, whether they're your subordinates or your boss, there are techniques to help you do well in those situations. And I think that's what you need to do. You have to work on yourself at the same time that you're sort of pushing those cracks aside so you can rise up to the next level or help somebody else rise up to the next level.
Mentorship is key. I agree with you, Dr. Gates, just to piggyback on what you said. The mentorship is key, but what I've been able to do is maintain the mentorship from early on. Those individuals that I call colleagues, they're still seasoned and they're still ahead of me. And so therefore I still tap into those colleagues for the mentorship. I still ask questions. The voice I have, the strength in that voice, yes, the foundation of that, that's my parents. And then it moves from there. And so it has just amplified over the years to where it is today. I did not get here alone by God's grace, okay? But I did maintain the relationships with the mentors in these spaces that I now call colleagues. And so throughout the years, Dr. Sue Bartlett at LSU, Dr. Haas here at the Health Sciences Center, Dr. Shamal Desai here at the Health Science Center, Dr. James Diaz here at the Health Science Center. These are individuals that I still reach out to. Dr. Peggy Honore, these are individuals that I still communicate with and I'm talking to and learning from, so that this is what you hear, the culmination. They are educating me and building me in a sense, so that I have this voice to push forth to push forth, in this space. And with that said, I do have several leadership roles, and doing those items well and making sure that they are visible, in respect of that, and the work is visible, that it's important work, that it's valid work, that it's effective. Because in that space, it has an opportunity where it's opening doors for others behind me. And so using the leadership roles as I chaired committees here at the Health Sciences Center, in the School of Medicine, in the School of Graduate Studies, opening those doors and having products that actually make a difference, effective products that can change, and working with my colleagues. I am not doing this alone. It's a team effort, although I sit in the leadership role, but at the same time, making sure that it's visible and making sure that people know your interest. The colleagues that I mentioned in terms of the mentorship, they know that I'm interested in leadership. It's not something that, and it's not leadership about me. It's never been about me. This is bigger than me. This is what I can contribute. And so they know that, and that's the reason they're pouring into me, and that therefore I'm using what I'm learning from these individuals and others to go into space. I will even say my husband, who's a principal, I tap into him. He mentors me. Okay. So I'm going anywhere anyone can feed me with information. I'm a sponge. And so as I take on these roles, that is what I do. I make my intentions known, and I use what is poured into me to give back.
We've got a few other questions in the chat that I want to get to. The first is, well, I'll ask them both, and everybody can choose which one to answer. The first is, any piece of advice that came from an unlikely source, maybe not a traditional mentor, not your parents, that was transformative, and what was it? And then the other question is about work-life balance in its entirety. So how did you do it? Were you pressured to, have a particular family life or not have a particular family life? Has that pressure persisted? How do you deal with that? So open it up for everybody. Piece of advice or work-family balance?
Okay, so if any of my sisters are watching, they're all going to start laughing here because I do not have children. I was never married, and again, my peer group, my age group, we went into this profession to be surgeons. And it was very clear to us that we would not get pregnant during, residency. And at the time, before we were at 100, when the AUA did a survey about, do you have children or whatever, 95% of the men said yes, 5% of the women urologists had children. So that I don't want to talk about. But what I wanted to piggyback onto what you were saying, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna let other people talk about work-life balance, is that for people that are listening to this, what I want people to not lose sight of is that we went into this profession to take care of patients and to improve patient outcomes. And as you're mentoring, one of the goals of the Society of Women in Urology is to encourage, public education regarding urologic issues. So I know, Jennifer, you're asking, how can we do this and how can we be leaders? But let's not lose sight of the goal that all of these things that we're trying to achieve, more participation in women and everything, it also is to take better care of the urologic community or for the medical community. And so I just think it's important for people to understand that we're not just trying to become tenured professors. Maybe some people are, but we're actually trying to be better physicians with all of this mentoring.
That's a great point. Yep.
On the work-life balance, I guess I'll weigh in very briefly on that. I had 2 children before I went to graduate school. One was 3 and one was 5. And I was headed off to Tulane for public health and a degree in epidemiology. And so my 3-year-old was in nursery school, my 5-year-old was in kindergarten, and I was in graduate school. So I packed 3 brown bags every morning and we all went off to our various and sundry schools. I had a husband who would occasionally leave his work and drive carpools, so they got where they were going. I had a sister that I asked to help. Sisters are family is often very helpful if they can. All my family was in Crowley, but my sister came to New Orleans, so I was in luck there. But it's a balancing act. It's not always easy. One of the questions I saw was who cooks at night at your house? And I think, well, me, and that's been going on for a really long time. And so every now and then we'll pack up the kids and go to a restaurant, because I said, there is no way I'm cooking again tonight, at 8 o'clock. So, and I think we all run into that. It's just, it's there, but it's worth it. I wouldn't give up my family life, and I certainly wouldn't give up my professional life. So we can make it work if we try hard and take vitamins.
Plenty of vitamins.
Lots of coffee. I would say
Definitely
Plenty of
coffee.
vitamins.
But I
lots
think
of
it's
coffee.
wonderful, for my own children, as hard as it's been. And I remember, I had 2 children in residency, and I would put on my scrubs to go to work at night in the ER. And one of my kids would say, Mama, don't wear your green clothes. Don't wear your green clothes, because they knew what that meant, that I would be gone overnight. But really that's, they got it because they saw the fulfillment of being able to do what I loved. And I knew that I knew that it was going to be okay when my youngest, who's now 11, almost 12, I think she was like 4 or 5. I was taking a nap before a night shift, and I woke up, and she had made a little card for me, and she had put a $5 bill in the car. I don't know where, probably from my purse, and said, Mama, this is for you, so you can have a snack tonight. I'm proud of you. And that, learning that lesson for her, seeing that, yeah, maybe Mama's sometimes tired, and Mama can't be your room mother every year, or, I can't necessarily bring the snack to school, but there's a higher purpose. And Dr. Kennard, like you said, it's to take care of people, and that's imbued in everything you do. I hope that, and those of you with older children can weigh in, that is far more meaningful than whether or not you picked them up from school every day.
I would say it isn't. I have 3. The oldest is 16. I've always worked. I've never been at home. I rarely was able to be the room mother or carpooler or anything like that. No one's so far incredibly damaged, but I think it's important too that when you are choosing a spouse, that you choose someone that's supportive, right? My husband, he doesn't cook, but he does help to clean up, and he helps with childcare. And it really does help when you have someone who will help you. Just with the basics, even if it's nothing big, helping to get lunches ready, help, independent enough to be able to help care for the children is really important. So I think they find that they get to spend time with both their mother and their father, or, both spouses take care of the children. There's not just mom everything. And I think that was the most important thing I learned from being a working mother, that it just doesn't have to be me, that their dad can help to do just about anything that I can do. It may be different. It may not be the same. It may not be, oh, mommy does it this way, but at least it's done. And so they get a chance to spend time with their dad and form bonds and do different things that they wouldn't normally do if I was always available to them. So, and it is a higher calling to be able to take the time to care for other people. And sometimes we talk about things and they ask about the day, and, it makes them proud that they, get a chance that their mom does this, that, and the other for other people too, as well as them.
Yeah, a friend just gave me a book called something like A Boy, the Mule, a Fox, and something like that. It's passing around. It's kind of a little sweet book. It's just mostly pictures. But one of the things, so the night I got it, I read it. And she's also a dentist, a very wonderful woman from Mississippi. And in there, it talked about that you should forgive yourself first and foremost when you're forgiving people for not being perfect. And so I think this is a challenge to a lot of us, because we feel like we're pulled in so many directions and we're expected to do so much. But sometimes I think in my life that I'm letting somebody else let me do a lot because I'm hoarding that credit. So I've had to learn to let go and let my husband do more and let my children do more for themselves too, which probably didn't hurt. So
I have to say that if you're on this program today, it shows something already about yourself. And you probably over time will develop the wisdom and the skills to be able to solve these problems. So keep after it is the point. And don't anticipate difficulties, solve them when they happen.
Exactly. Solve them when they happen. I learned time management from my, as growing up in this path. I learned a lot from my mom and really understanding how to manage a lot from this. So our mom really, just watching her and be a wife, an educator, pursue her own education as she earned her master's degrees, etc. And in that space, just drawing from her and watching how she managed her life. And so then that translates into my selection in respect of by grace. My husband gives me the love, support, and freedom to be me and to do this in this space. And so although we don't have, I have children from his former marriages. They're my children as well. And so, yeah, several of them they were young, but when I first came to the family at 28 years old. So I've learned to manage and over these last almost 22 years of how to gather and make sure that everything works. But in that space, this is so much bigger than me. And it's a calling. I find myself in the middle of the night sending emails to colleagues. I know it drives them crazy. Jen, you've received a few.
I do.
Okay, but it's so much bigger than me. It's so much more important than me as an individual. And so in that space, my husband too have supported me. And so who cooks dinner at night? We do. There are times in which there's been weeks I have not donned the kitchen. I didn't have the time, but he did it. Even as he is a principal, he made sure that the meals were cooked. So, and he took care of, and he shared that with me. So we share our life and our household together in this space. And I thank him for allowing me to be me in this space and therefore see and pursue my higher calling and in respect as not only a biochemist, but as a biochemist that's pursuing opportunities in biomedical education through an avenue of DEI for the next generation.
Everyone, I do want to say that we just have time for a couple more questions. So we are going to wrap up in about 7 to 8 minutes. So please ask your questions, post your questions so we can get to them before we end.
Any particular advice that any of you got that you think was, particularly transformative? I think sometimes we all want that one magic piece that opens up the world to us and we say, aha, now I know. It doesn't come like that. Sometimes it comes with years of people telling you things and then you finally choosing to believe them. But I'm wondering if there's any sort of guiding principles that someone told any of you that you think was useful for folks on the call.
Crickets.
It's a hard one.
Okay.
I think that you should learn everything you can when you have the opportunity. When you're a resident, man, take advantage of that. You're a student and learn as much about our profession as possible, because obviously when you're out in practice, you have to keep up, you have to constantly change and evolve, but you're never going to have that much of a concentration of people to help teach you. And one of my wonderful colleagues, a general surgeon, Freddie McRae, used to even say, you know, you can learn a lot from a bad surgeon. You can learn what not to do also. And it just take advantage of that. And all of these things about leadership and mentorship, maybe let that rest while you're trying to achieve your goal. And I think that being more, it's one of the few times in life that you can be as focused, is what I'm trying to say.
One of the other things is that somebody that we'd sort of developed in my practice group was that we were doing the ICU, which means we were up a lot at night and didn't get a lot of sleep. And one of my associates said, when you can't sleep, eat. And the other was, quit worrying about it. If you just don't focus on the fact that you haven't slept tonight or people are hammering at you all the time, don't focus on that. Focus on what you can do. Focus on just getting through these situations and stop focusing on worrying about it. And, oh, this is unfair, or I'm so tired. Well, just get through it. Go run a marathon, because then you'll learn about getting through something that makes you tired.
Yeah, in emergency medicine, you know, we call that the Zen of Seven, because emergency medicine is shift work, and no matter how terrible your shift is, and they are terrible, 7 o'clock comes, and after 7 o'clock, you go home. But I think it's sort of extrapolated to what you're saying, is that you can be consumed by all the things that are going wrong, or you know, issues or problems you can't solve. But there's always a point where you look back and you say, oh, I'm done with that now. That's over. I got through it and I'm at a different place. So you can spend those 12 hours really just being consumed with anger and fear and you know, exhaustion. Or you can say, you know what? I know I'm going to be home soon. And no matter what, how bad of a day I had, it's better.
Don't let anyone put you in a box. I think that's very important. And I speak to that as a classically trained biochemist. That's not all I know. You know, as an undergraduate at LSU years ago, I earned minors in zoology, but also political science, and specifically constitutional law emphasis. And that, along with my second master's in healthcare management from the University of New Orleans, they actually feed into what I'm doing today. And if I did not only stay a path and become, you know, and have a true intensity in one area, but also be willing to open and branch out and step outside of my direct trajectory, I think that would have been that would have made a difference in where I am today. So I would hope that individuals that not only stay open to information when you're in that space, as Dr. Gates said, learn all that you can learn, but also make a point of continuous lifelong learning. And therefore, don't let anyone put you in a box, because you never know where your skill set, as your skills develop, where they will lead you. So you have to be prepared for opportunities as they open up. And just thinking about that, I think that's important. Or from the movie, don't put baby in a corner.
I would say the best advice I ever received from anybody was that only open mouths get fed. You only get what you ask for, and you only get what you expect. So it's very important to write down bigger dreams than what you think you can do, to try and achieve things that you think maybe you can't do, and set into motion some things that maybe you think are too big for you, because you'd be surprised what you can do. A friend of mine told me the other day, you, my dear, have done hard things and you will continue to do hard things until they're easy. And I think that's the way you should approach things, that not everything is very easy. Some things are extremely difficult. Some things are extremely tough. But you do get to the other side, and you're usually better for them once you get to the other side.
And always ask for the salary that you think the men are asking for, not the one that you think you deserve, because there's generally
never discount yourself. Always ask for more.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to take the time to say thank you to all of you. You know, doing this panel was a wish of mine, if you will, maybe 4 years ago, when I came onto the scene here in New Orleans and started to meet with some of the alum who were female. And in my previous job, they were all male. So this was the first opportunity that I was getting to hear females' career journeys and what that looked like for them. And I learned at a young age that I wasn't going to have a different life if I didn't seek out mentors around me and people around me and be curious about other people's lives and ask questions. And I've just found so much value in listening to people share, who are willing to share their stories, and how I can do things differently and affect change. And so I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for sharing your stories and taking the time to be part of this panel. We do hope that this will be a yearly event and it will be in person. It's unfortunate that it's virtual, but it's better than not having it at all. I also just want to echo a lot of the things that I heard. You know, Christy was sharing her schedule. She's a dear friend of mine, and you know, one of the things she said is just you work harder than everybody else, and that is true. And when you think about the people who really affected change over time, over our course of history as human beings, whether male or female, people who really affected the kind of change that impacted generations to come, they did work harder than everybody else. They did persevere and they did push through and they continued until the work was done. And we are that next generation to pick up those torches and keep the work moving forward. And I'm just really grateful for all of you who have gone before me and have done amazing things and have shown myself and the rest of us younger females that we can do it too. And you know, one of the things that struck me too was all of you got on and said, I don't know why I'm here. I don't feel like I'm a Wonder Woman, but you are. And all of you, you know, there was an exchange in the chat about Dr. Gates. I must have been one of your students or residents, in which she said the best advice she'd gotten from Dr. Gates was do not turn down a leadership role. And you know, those things really impact for a long time. And continue to make change, continue to take up space, continue to be in those spots and to give that advice, because it really sticks forever. And I'm just so grateful for all of you. And a lot of us are parents on the panel. You are all parents. Your children look at you as Wonder Women. Maybe not now at 3 or 5 or 6, but as they get older, they understand the sacrifices that were made. And I'm just hoping that my child will go on to affect change and help move things in a positive way, because we still have a lot of work to do. And I hope that this panel now and in the future will help to forge some of that work that still needs to get done. So thank you again. I really hope that you all had a great time on the panel, and we look forward to having you back in person as our inaugural panelists. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.